Welcome, and thank you so much to all of you for joining us today for our second speaker series event. I'm Rosanne Gray, and I have the privilege of being the CEO of In-Kind Direct and your host for today's conversation. You may have worked with In-Kind Direct for some time, or you may have just started working with us during these last few months of crisis. But actually, we were founded by His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, in 1996. So we're looking forward to celebrating our 25th anniversary next year. And we're the leading UK charity distributing consumer goods donated by businesses to a network of thousands of UK charities. This could be toiletries, stationery, household supplies, clothing, bedding, toys, books, or even small appliances. And really what we do at In-Kind Direct is we provide that single solution for companies to maximise their impact. And on the other hand, we look to support charities with the access to those essentials and help them to achieve huge savings to deliver the vital work that they do day in, day out. You know, when I think back over the last few months, I think we've all gained a better understanding of how important everyday essentials are in our lives to keeping us safe, clean and well. Whether it's toilet rolls, household cleaning products or hand sanitizers, we all better appreciate these household brands and how they can make a difference, you know, day in, day out in our lives and in those of our neighbours. It's been great to see so many of our charity and corporate partners join us today. And it's in understanding each other that I believe we can build stronger solutions. So to help us dig in a bit deeper and shed some light on their experiences, I'm really delighted to be joined by a panel of guests today. They have been willing to answer some of our questions as we think about how bringing brands and local communities together can create even greater positive impact for change. Today I'd like to introduce and welcome that panel. Now, at the moment, we have two of our panelists with us, which is wonderful. We hope that the third panelist will be joining us. As you can imagine, we are getting used to some of the technical teams in the background. So I'm very much hoping that Sarah Willingham, an entrepreneur and one of our In-Kind Direct ambassadors, will be able to join us as we go through this conversation. But at the moment, she's not with us at the moment. You know, most of you will know Sarah most probably for her Dragon's Den experience, known as one of the dragons. But I can assure you that having spent time with Sarah, she's definitely no dragon. Also around our virtual table today is Michelle Plant, a senior brand manager for Carex, and a well-known hand wash brand, part of the PZ Cussons group, and it's great to have Michelle join us today. And Michael, the founder and chairman of Rackets Cubed. Rackets Cubed are one of our incredible charity partners, and I know that they work in a number of cities and communities across the UK. So I would love for Michael and Michelle to introduce themselves. So over to you, Michelle. Would love you to introduce yourself to those who've joined us.
Good morning, everyone. So as Rosanne says, I'm senior brand manager on Carex and also on Baylis of Bond Street at PZ Cussons. So PZ Cussons is based in Manchester. We have a number of different brands, including Imperial Leather and Original Source. But today I'm here to talk to you about Carex, which is the UK's #1 hand hygiene brand. And we've got a long-standing relationship with In-Kind Direct, and more recently we've been working very closely on Carex. So looking forward to talking to you about that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Michelle. Michael, over to you.
Thank you, Rosanne. So I'm Michael Hill. We founded Rackets Cubed, which is about 4 years ago, which is a charity that works with primary schools in areas of high disadvantage. And we partner them with aspirational hosts. An aspirational host could be a local university, it could be a local club, it could be an independent school. And basically the children come in and do an hour of maths, an hour of sport, and we feed them an evening meal. We run that across 6, 7 cities. And obviously COVID caused a slight change in the running of that model, which I'll come on to later.
Great. Well, thank you so much to having both of you join us in today's conversation. And I think already we can see, with having Michelle and Michael here, we've got a great different perspectives on how we bring those two worlds together. I know that I have a few questions to ask the panel to get the ball rolling. But we are very keen to hear from all of you that have joined us today. So please do feel free to submit any questions for our panel in the live chat box. You'll see there's a little icon on the right hand side of the screen with a question mark, and in that please do type your questions and our team will pick those up, and I will be able to make sure that we get to those throughout this conversation. So we'll cover as many questions as we can at the end of the session. We do have a question I thought really to actually try and kick the ball off here for all of our panel members. And when we think about the changes we've experienced, and Michael, you sort of touched on that for your organisation, we've all had to adapt. We've all had to think differently. I'd be really interested to know what have been the main changes for you and for your organisation. Michelle, I'd love to hear about that from your perspective at PZ Cussons.
There's been lots of changes to our organisation over the past few months. I suppose the biggest changes, certainly initially when the COVID-19 pandemic began, will have all seen there was a massive change in consumer behaviour literally overnight. So consumers, I guess, initially panic buying and going out, getting their hand washes and their hand sanitisers. But it actually meant then that the demand for Carex massively increased. So consumers turned to Carex as a brand that they could trust. But literally it meant that our supply chain had to act completely differently. They were really agile and adapted to the increased demand. But it meant, having to ramp up the production in our factories as quickly as possible, sourcing different materials to make sure that we could meet the demand, and also for our sales teams, so working really closely with our customers to try and get the products onto shelves as quickly as possible so that consumers did have Carex there to buy when they went out to store. But because of it was just such a, I know the word's been used so much, but an unprecedented time that it just couldn't have been forecasted as to how much volume we needed to get out there, that we had to think differently. And one of the key things that we did as a team was working really closely with In-Kind Direct to make sure that our products got out to the most vulnerable people as quickly as possible, because obviously people were being told that one of the ways to protect themselves from coronavirus was to wash your hands or to sanitize your hands when you're out and about. So those most vulnerable groups who really needed our products and who couldn't access them at the time, we worked with In-Kind Direct to get the products to them directly, which is just such a massive support, because although we work with a number of charities directly and some community groups where we got the products out to them, we just wouldn't have been able to have the scale that we got with working with In-Kind Direct, because it actually meant that we could reach almost 2,000 charities over these past 6 months, which we just wouldn't have physically been able to do ourselves. And I think in terms of working differently, we're just now starting to really plan ahead and make sure that rather than it being a huge, massive spike that we quickly need to react to, we've got these ongoing donations that ensure the charity can then meet the needs of all of the charities that come to In-Kind Direct for these essential products.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It's interesting for those of us who have been busy being able to go out and purchase more hand wash than we'd ever realised was important in the past, actually what goes on in the background to enable those of us who are wanting to go out and buy, what needs to happen in the background. So I would love to pick up that and as we come back to that a little bit. Michael, it's interesting, Michelle there talked a little bit about reaching the most vulnerable and what they had to do from a brand perspective to adapt. What about Rackets Cubed? What changes have you had to put in place and how have you had to think differently?
It's interesting. I'd say, we almost had to invert our whole operating model. The core premise was that the children would, although they were partnered with a local host, they would leave the school and go into the host, whether that was Imperial University or Hull University, Roehampton University, the National Tennis Centre. Obviously, once the COVID lockdown started, obviously that was just not possible. What was interesting for most of the schools that we work with, though, although the host sites, the universities or the national centres were shut, our schools weren't, because many of the schools had high levels of vulnerable children and vulnerable families, so they remained open actually over Easter. But what was interesting was we were due to, and all the areas, to be honest, had a high food need, even prior to COVID. So we had been preparing to launch a small pilot in Wandsworth just after Easter about how we try to help some of the families. Obviously, COVID comes along, and the school asked me, could we run the pilot anyway? But the head teacher said, I don't know how big the need is and what the need's going to be. So we said, sure. She asked the local families on a Friday afternoon by her clarion texting. Over the weekend, 60 families came back and said they needed urgent help. We had 100 by the Thursday, and that grew up to 300 families requesting help within the first 3 weeks. And what was really interesting about it was, obviously there was a core food need, particularly, as you remember, the food chain was also messed up, protein, pasta, rice, but toiletries, particularly hand wash and toilet rolls. They just physically couldn't get them. And obviously the other thing I'd say with these communities, it's not just, in fact, it wasn't so much the people on universal credit or free school meals. It was the families that were originally low income. They could have been 0-hour contracts, Uber drivers, cleaners, who went to no income. So suddenly there was a huge need. And I'll say, what was interesting was the feedback we got on particularly the personal hygiene products was exceptional, because they're such a basic need that they could not get. Anyway, that accelerated from the one program. Within about 3-4 weeks, we were running it across the 6 cities, and we're still running strong now at the moment.
Thank you, Michael. I think it's interesting that word you use, invert our operating model, suddenly having to turn everything on its head. And what struck me there was moving from 60 families to 300 just in a space of a week. I look forward to coming back and sort of picking up that conversation with you a bit as we go through this morning. Michelle, you've talked there about, as a manufacturer, wanting to make sure that you were able to support people like Michael and Rackets Cubed, and you talked about the 2,000 charities. As a brand, how did you make that decision? Because you were trying to, I'm thinking that you were trying to make sure you had enough product to get out onto the shelves of retailers, but it sounds like at the same time you were also thinking about your community, and you were having to make some very difficult decisions about where your product was going to go. So how, with the challenges that you were facing, did you make that decision, and why did you feel it was important to create impact as a brand when you could have just focused your work on your core customers and consumers?
Yeah, I think a couple of reasons really. I mean, one just being that as a brand, we've got a long-standing history of working with charities and community groups and making sure that hand hygiene is available to everyone. And so, during this time as well, we were obviously really aware of consumer perceptions and all of, what people were saying in the public as well about, brands profiteering from the crisis, and just really, conscious that whilst we were doing good work in the background, we really wanted to scale that up and make sure that we were being true to what the brand stands for and getting hand hygiene out there to the people who need it most. So whilst we were working really quickly in the background to try and get the products out to the public as quickly as possible, we knew that by working with In-Kind Direct, we could get them to the people who needed it most as quickly as possible. So I guess, you know, from a brand perspective as well, that by getting the products out there and working really closely with In-Kind Direct, we can also make people aware of the work that we're doing and reassure people that, you know, we are making every effort to get the products to the people who need them the most. And I think, sorry, just to add to that, we've kind of, after the initial sort of reaction, I suppose, to what was happening in the kind of COVID-19 crisis, we've now also started planning further ahead with those donations, so that it's not just a reactive you know, activity that we're doing, it's an ongoing support plan, so that we can support those charities. And one of the things that we've been doing most recently with In-Kind Direct is running a promotion where consumers can, if they buy a refill pack from Carex, then also a pack is donated to In-Kind Direct. So we've started really working closely with the team to think about what's the best ways that we can work together to make sure that we're making the donations, but also getting the best impact for the brand as well, so that consumers are knowing that we are making a difference.
Michelle, I find that so interesting, so picking up on consumer perception. And I'd love, you know, I'm thinking, do you see that consumer perception and our engagement as consumers, do you think that care and concern that we have for our neighbours and people who live in our communities, do you think that's going to continue as we look into the year ahead? Or do you think that's something that may change again as our perceptions change? What do you sort of foresee happening in the coming months as you think about Carex and your consumer?
Yeah, I'm definitely see that continuing, and just working really closely with you to make sure that we continue that support and ramp up the impact that we can make together, because I think that's one of the most important things that we've seen, is that by working together we can make a bigger difference. So I think whilst we have a number of activities that we do directly on Carex to support the communities, we also continue to work with In-Kind Direct to make sure that we're reaching that scale really. And yeah, definitely it's definitely part of Carex's plans moving forward, and I think that kind of the perception that is already there in terms of being a trusted brand, because we know that that's with a brand that consumers turn to, you know, a brand that they trust, but then continuing to build on that and make sure that we maintain that kind of warmth and credible #1 position and the brand that people trust, but not only trust for themselves, but know that we're doing good, and that, you know, by buying into Carex, that you're also making a difference as well. I think that that's really important and something that we can build on.
That's brilliant, and I think that's, you know, as we look at the period that we've gone through, I think it's interesting thinking of what are we going to learn and what are we going to take from the last few months that we can build on for the future. I know that, you know, thinking about our perceptions and sharing and generosity is something that we very much at In-Kind Direct hope is something that continues and is a legacy from our learning of this, you know, this time. And great to be hearing that that's something for Carex that you're also thinking of. Michael, I would love to sort of, you know, go back to you and think a little bit more about those sort of 300 families that you had to suddenly start supporting, and then you started to work not only in Wandsworth but took that out to other cities. What difference, you know, did working with In-Kind Direct as well as other organisations to support you at the time make, and is hopefully still making for you in the last few months?
It was very significant. You know, what was interesting at the beginning was we just did not know the scale or scope of demand. So we were learning very much real time. So in Wandsworth, and we just didn't know how to source all the materials. What was interesting was we worked very closely with the local school. And I guess one of the key things is when you're talking about the, when we grew from 100 to 150 to 300, we relied on the schools to know the families, to have a rough idea of making sure people who are newly vulnerable, to be honest. So they weren't on any registers, they weren't on universal credit, they were not known by social services, but there was real needs. And so the schools provided us a lot of local intelligence. But of course, what we needed to do was be able to get them in a consistent way, the core products, whether it's the food or the personal hygiene. And that's where, I think In-Kind was fantastic, because as it became clear to us that we were going to scale, I'll give you an idea, Hull grew to 300 families within 2 weeks. Leeds, Manchester, Birmingham all went through 100, and Birmingham went through 200 in 2-3 weeks. So very large, fast scaling. So what was we just would not have been able to fulfill that need unless we'd been able to work with somebody like In-Kind to say, well, can you supply us in 6 cities or 7 cities where we eventually grew to, and supply us 100 sort of hand washes, 200 toilet rolls into Leeds for a week on Wednesday, or and that was a real time, and us understanding what your supply constraints were and what was reasonable or not, because obviously you yourselves were getting impacted. So what I think one of the key things for us was that dynamic learning, as we're all learning so fast, we're all seeing things that we'd not seen before, and it was the ability to really just, one of the benefits is we're all fairly familiar now with Zoom and Google Meets and Teams. And what would often take 6 months was literally taking a 5-10 minute call saying, we want to do this, can you help us? And you get an answer yes or no fast. So I think there's been some tremendous positives that have come out of this, but there's just no way a charity like us could have done this without the likes of In-Kind.
Wow, it really does sound, Michael, that being able to scale so quickly, as you said, was a huge challenge. It's great to hear that you could find the right products that you were needing from In-Kind Direct, because I think you only just joined us earlier this year as one of our charities. So I think that has been, as you said, an opportunity. We've seen more and more charities joining our network as they have heard about us, and the need for some of those essential products became more challenging for them to find. And our resources have just been stretched all across the charity sector. Michael, thank you so much. Sarah, I think you have also been able to join us, and thank you for bearing with us with some of our technical difficulties. As I said, Sarah, earlier, you have been one of our amazing ambassadors at In-Kind Direct over a number of years now, but I know that you wear many hats, and we were just talking earlier about how we've seen the last few months affect all of our different ways of working. How has it affected you and the organisations that you connect with, the crisis and this period of change? What has happened for you, Sarah?
But I spend most of my time with very small businesses, and so I think I have them. I can speak from the point of view of small businesses more than I can from any larger organisation. And I think what's been so interesting watching how small businesses have adapted to an enormous change, one that I don't think we'll ever see again in our lifetime or in the lifetime of those little, often family-run businesses. It's been all about being flexible, being agile, and being able to immediately respond to a need of the consumer. So when Michael was talking then about how very quickly the need grew in a way that had not happened before, it's exactly as we've seen within small businesses. And I think what's been the businesses that actually will have come out of this well or certainly at a point where they're going to be able to survive, have been those ones that have been able to react very, very quickly. And I think from a consumer perspective, we'll never forget the businesses that were there for us, that kind of stood by us. And that could be anything from, you know, the local grocer managing to stay open and, you know, get food to my mom, who was isolating when she couldn't get a slot at any of the supermarkets, for example. So it was getting the basics to people in a way that nobody had ever had to do before, because we were able to just pop out and do it. And there are a lot of people who were scared to leave their front door. And actually, we saw small businesses step in. And I think it's been about changing the business model to make us as agile as possible. And it's one of the reasons I actually love working with small businesses, because I feel like we're kind of driving a jet ski rather than a big oil tanker. And as soon as this happened, you saw people immediately change their business model. A lot of them even changed the products that they were selling because they couldn't get the supplies anymore. I spoke to a flower shop in central London who she'd had, you know, 80% of her business had come through events. And overnight, of course, that disappeared. And not only that, she couldn't actually get the supply in. She couldn't get the flowers that she needed. And she actually replaced all of her revenue with plants, which she started delivering to somebody's home. So I do think it's those businesses that have responded to the local community or responded to their larger customer base. What have the needs been during that time that will, you know, as consumers, we will not forget them.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I think it is, you know, this time it's people like your mum and my mum and, you know, our family members that suddenly it becomes very real, and where we've seen the support of local businesses. And I think it's most probably, as you've said, it's the smaller businesses that have as much role to play as some of the larger companies that are out there. And when we talk about brands, I don't think brands, you know, brands can be smaller businesses, they can be large corporates. We think about something, Michelle was sort of talking about Carex and how important, you know, an essential brand like that is, and how that has really you know, changed the way that Carex has engaged in their local communities. I'm thinking from your experience and working with businesses who are all building their brands in different ways. How do you think, you know, or what would you be saying to different brands, how they can use their recent experience to shape plans going forward? Would you know, encourage people to be doing differently from this experience?
Yeah, I think the focus on a lot of the larger brands, and Carex have done that so brilliantly over this period, on the softer brand values rather than the sort of, there's been the need, of course, we need something delivered to us, but I think those softer brand values where the larger businesses have either supported the consumer in need or even have supported the smaller businesses. I do quite a lot of work with American Express supporting their smaller businesses. And I've done this for years and years. And one of the things that they did, as an example, which went down extremely well with small businesses, is normally they have a small business Saturday, which is at the beginning of December. And this is where you as a consumer, you go into a shop and you spend £10 and Amex give you £5 back on your card. They then globally extended that and did it all over the summer. So as soon as the shops were allowed to open, so 15th of June, they then said, right, 3 months we'll now do this. You go into one of our small businesses and you spend £10, we'll give you £5 back. And I think it's where the larger businesses have looked at those, as I said, those softer brand values and supported where they can people who need it. So that can either be product giving to the consumer, it can be financially to the consumer, it can be helping the smaller business to be able to provide for the consumer. You know, in your case, it's helping you're not personally giving, you know, we don't actually give to the end user, we allow the charity to do that. And it's that huge circle of all of the component parts and larger businesses playing their part in that and saying, okay, actually, we might not even have access directly to the consumer, but we're going to help. And I think that's where we won't forget the businesses that have gone through that journey, whether it be for a charitable need, a consumer need, or a small business need. Ultimately, it's the larger businesses helping out.
You've picked up there, Sarah, on the softer skills or the softer side of brand values. It feels, Michelle, that as a brand manager at Carex, I'm sure that must resonate with you as when you think about the values that you have at Carex. I imagine that is what has driven your decision to support communities through In-Kind Direct.
Yes, definitely. I mean, as a brand, we really want people to get out and enjoy life as much as possible, and that's kind of been the driving force behind our brand, is just helping people to still continue to live life to the full, even though it's such a scary time. That our products can make even just a small difference, that, you know, by having access to hand wash or hand sanitizer, you feel a bit safer to, you know, whether it's to actually get out and enjoy life or to just, you know, just feel safe and comforted. So definitely ties back to what the brand is all about. And then to be able to actually make a difference by donating our products and you know, getting them to these vulnerable groups, it just goes back to, you know, it's in our name, Carex, it's about caring, and we want to make sure that we continue to care for our communities and our consumers and just, you know, get the products out there. And that's where the support of In-Kind Direct has just been massive, and just being able to kind of get the scale that we wouldn't have been able to do by ourselves. I think that working in partnership is just so important.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. It's we use the word Carex quite often, but actually reminding that care is a part of that word is that really stands out. I've got a last question that I'd love to ask all three of you. And please, for those of you who have joined us, if you've got any questions that you would like to ask the panel, we've had a few coming through as we've gone through this conversation, and I'll be turning to those soon. So please do add any questions that you would like Sarah or Michelle or Michael to answer. But coming back to you, Michael, you know, we are very aware of where we are today in the UK, and we're, you know, with the news of this week of, you know, the crisis continuing, and unfortunately, you know, new measures needing to be put in place, which is absolutely right. You know, when we think about the next few months, I would love to get an understanding from a charity perspective as Rackets Cubed. You know, what are you planning for? You know, you've already been through this change and that you and adaptation you had to make earlier this year. I'd love to get a sense of what are you doing going forward, and would you have any advice for other charities and any recommendations of how they can become part of the solution as we look to the next few months? Sure.
I think we trying to project the next 12 months is extremely difficult. We're anticipating the next 6 months to remain extremely dynamic. All the sites are expecting and have been actually planning for, over the last 4 to 6 weeks, a second spike or second wave, whatever we call it, and a big economic impact from furloughing. What we don't know is the scale of it, and it will vary a little bit city by city, and then also what happens to the supply chains. So we know they'll get disrupted. We know these communities will get disrupted. So we're very much sort of laying the foundations there. We talk to all our partners to try and anticipate it. New needs come up. For example, we had a new one relating to personal hygiene that came up over the last 2-3 weeks. A couple of the programmers were highlighting that the younger mothers, because many of them are younger, were sacrificing feminine hygiene to put food for the children. So, and then obviously we were trying and close that gap. And just going to have to be extremely dynamic. I think there's going to be a big need the smaller charities at the local level, as long as they've got good national partners, can make a really big, and work in partnership can make a really big difference. And we just have to communicate with you, communicate with the schools, communicate with the families, and react fast, to be honest. That's my best advice.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I think that really resonates with what Sarah was saying earlier about, you know, both on the business side, those that have been flexible and agile are the ones that have mostly going to come out of this period, as we all know, being able to survive. It sounds very much the same for us as charities as well. Interesting, as we come into this period of winter coming up, you talked about the needs. Are there any specific products or any way that In-Kind Direct do you think can help yourselves or other charities and our donors? You know, are there any new needs around products that you think are going to be more relevant in these next few months for Rackets Cubed and others?
Well, on the food side, we're expecting a bunch of hoarding starting. So we're beginning to see it already in London. The big conurbations have very, very significant supply disruption. So my strong suspicion is in 2 weeks there'll be no pasta and rice left in the supermarkets, but you know, and eggs and that stuff will repeat itself. Toilet rolls are beginning to be requested quite frequently. Obviously, hand sanitizer is just a consistent one. To be honest, there's some, you know, dental hygiene's being neglected, so we're getting more and more requests for not just toothpaste but toothbrushes, because many of the families actually don't have toothbrushes. So without the toothbrushes, you know, it's a problem. And certainly the feminine hygiene, that's a new, you know, that's obviously not weather dependent, but I'm assuming it's economic. It's a function of just the duration of the economic dislocation. There's some real hardship now going on, and there's some really tough, you know, trade-offs that are being made. So, you know, that's we'll just have to. We think it will get economically worse, to be honest, in these communities. So we're anticipating that the need will get higher, both in scale and both in terms of the numbers and the depth of it. We just don't know how much, if I'm honest.
Michael, thank you. And I think when we actually bring it down to some of those essential products like a toothbrush and toothpaste, and how important they are in being able to support people alongside hand sanitizer and toilet roll. That I think is, you know, I think that's the reality of what this economic challenging period is meaning for so many families in our communities at the moment. Michelle, just turning back to you, I've loved hearing this morning about what you're doing at PZ Cussons and Carex through your work. What would be your sort of advice or recommendation to another brand or another company that might be considering doing something differently, building off what they're hearing from their consumers as they think about how to best support communities?
Well, I'd certainly recommend working in partnership with others to make things happen, because I just think working together you can make a bigger impact and make a bigger difference to people's lives. So certainly from my perspective, working with In-Kind Direct has just made it just so much easier, because just your network of being able to reach thousands of charities, like I said earlier, we wouldn't have been able to do it ourselves. So working together, you know, from my perspective, it was just making a delivery to your warehouse, and then you do all the hard work in terms of getting it out to the people who need it most. So from a, you know, brand manager perspective, that is just something I would definitely recommend, is working with the likes of In-Kind Direct to make these things happen. And also just building them into your brand plans. So like Michael was just talking about in terms of what consumers need, you know, if as a brand that's something that you can help with, then build it into your plans and make sure that it's planned in for the future. So I know certainly from a Carex perspective, one of the things that is in our heritage and we want to continue to support is getting hygiene into schools as well, and just making sure that there isn't that hygiene poverty that we're seeing. You know, we hear sad stories as well, you know, about children just not having access to the basic hand hygiene or any hygiene, that therefore they get bullied in school. And just being able to make a big difference, if you can then build that into your plans, if that's the way that you want to make a difference, then working with someone like In Kind Direct to make that happen and make a big change, I would certainly recommend, you know, working with you guys.
Thanks, Michelle. It's yeah, I think what you've picked up there is a real sense of, you know, an encouragement, I think, because there are some brands who may be sitting on the fence at the moment about what is the value of donating products. But I think you've really highlighted through the way you responded there what that value means for you as a company and for the longer term for your consumers as well. Sarah, I'd love to come back to you as well. And you know, when we picked up on those local businesses and how important they are, you know, they're, as you said, they're struggling. What advice would you maybe give to some charities who are wanting to approach those local companies to ask for help? It's one of the questions actually that's come through from people who are listening today to this conversation. You know, saying, have you got any tips, because you've got such experience of working with local businesses, of how, as a charity, you could go and have a conversation with those local businesses? What's an important conversation that they could be having?
Yeah, I mean, I actually would sort of flip it the other way, where, because from the perspective of the small business, looking at how they can help the local charities within their local area, because I do think more than ever we are about to go into another 6 months where everything will become very small. We will become very local again. I think even the larger brands, I mean, even just listening to Michelle there, it's actually about getting it. Even though Carex is a huge brand working on a national level, it's actually about getting it to the kid in the local school. So it's all about the small, it's what is your route to market to the people who really need things. And I think it is a time for big business, small business, charities and people actually to work, and suppliers, the large business being the suppliers, to work together in a way that they've never worked before. So whoever can get that out to the end user, and in fact on a lot of occasions it will be the small business that will be able to provide what the consumer needs, and then you'll have the 5.8 million people in the UK living in extreme poverty who will actually need the help of the local charities. And finding a way of those small businesses and the local charities of working symbiotically, again, nobody's going to forget the people that stood by the local communities and got these products into them. And I think it is about looking locally. Where is the need locally? Who is supplying that need locally? So if I had a small business in a little town, I would be hunting down these charities and finding out, okay, how can I help you? And then the smaller businesses talking as well to their supply chain and getting help from their supply chain and their helpers to get products that Michael's talking about, we think, will start to disappear again, onto their shelves, and also helping the charity. So I think it is a time again for this huge, big sort of supply chain to work symbiotically. And I think even after this has disappeared, that local community feel will not go anywhere. I think it is about what are our local needs. I just think our world will become again smaller and more, our perspective will become smaller again as we almost go into crisis mode again, really. And I agree with Michael that I think we haven't, also across businesses, the impact, we haven't yet seen the impact of the fallout from the furlough, actually not seen the real economic impact of this. And people are going to be more in need than they've ever been at the end of this year. I think we're going to see, I think it's going to be carnage, to be honest, across there. And some of the small businesses, it's going to be Yeah, there's going to be a lot more redundancies, a lot more people losing their jobs, a lot less available.
Sarah, I think you've added to what Michael was sort of sharing about. We don't know what the next few months are going to bring, but Michael, you picked up on that it's families that may not have been in need in the past, as you said, Sarah, who are going to find themselves in need in the coming months ahead. And that's why having this incredible charity network working together with local businesses, as you said, Sarah, and the large companies such as PZ Cussons, it's this whole circle. I love that picture of a whole circle. We've got some great questions that have come in from so many people who have joined us today, and please do keep your questions coming. I'm going to turn to a few of those now in the time that we have remaining. I'll most be able to get to 2 or 3 of them, but we will definitely make sure that if we can't get to all of them today, we will pick them up and we will share back responses through our blogs and through our social media channels in the week to come. Michelle, there's been a great question for you that actually, you know, with a company like PZ Cussons, your employee base is, I don't actually know how many employees you have in PZ Cussons, but as much as sharing your work with your consumers, I imagine you spend quite a lot of time celebrating and what you're doing with partners like In Kind Direct with your employees. The question that's been asked is, how do you do that? How do your employees know what you're doing in local communities and have, you know, that others people could learn from?
Yeah, so, well, we have like an internal workplace, I don't know what to call it, like network, where we can communicate to all of our employees and give regular updates. So we make them available through that, and also whenever we have internal presentations, then we'll always share the work that we're doing with our employees. I think it's been a bit more of a challenging time at the moment because we would, you know, gather people together, have more of, you know, a bit more of a celebration, I suppose, in the way that it was phrased. But at the moment, I think just making our employees aware of the work that we're doing just really makes them feel proud to be part of a business that is making a difference, so that they can see, you know, all of their hard work is actually going towards doing real good work, because everybody is so busy at the moment. So just making sure that they're aware of that is just, yeah, I think it's really making people feel proud. And also another way that we make them aware of it is by doing things like our promotion that we're running at the moment, which is a buy one, we donate one. Then obviously we've had to work with our internal teams to make that happen. So making sure that the sales teams know that that's happening so that they can be speaking to their customers. So everyone's having these conversations and feeling part of it as well. So it's not just, you know, me working directly with you to make it happen. They're also working with their teams and know that, you know, for the products that we're selling, we're also donating products as well.
Michelle, thank you. Hopefully you'll share this webinar with your employees as well, so that they can hear more of what you've been doing. Usually at In Kind Direct, we also invite volunteers to come up to our warehouse in Telford and help us. I know we've had groups of people from many of our corporate partners join us just to kind of see the reality of getting those products packaged up and out to many of the different charities that we work with. And at the moment we've had to stop that, but we really look forward to being able to do that next year, because I think that really brings to life and is a great day for everybody to see their brands and their products actually getting out and being distributed. Thank you for that question, and I think that really is helpful, thinking about how important it is to keep our teams and our employees engaged in what the corporates are doing. Back to you, Sarah, with a question we have here from one of the participants. I think we're all really, you know, looking ahead to Christmas. I think it's less than 100 days away now, which I can't quite believe. You know, which really often Christmas is you know, the end of the year and that time of celebration, which actually feels quite stark with, you know, to what you were talking about now with the economic challenges. But what would you, as we think out to that Christmas period, what would you like to see brands doing more of as they think about Christmas? Is there anything that you would say, right, this year, I'd like to see you stepping up in a different way? What would that be?
I think actually acknowledging it is such a huge thing. The fact that we acknowledge that. I mean, I once did I think it's about 5 years ago, managed to get 5,000 Christmas dinners to 5,000 households of people that had never had a Christmas dinner in their life. So and I did that work with Morrison's at the time. And it's acknowledging that for some people, Christmas, and you know this so much better than I do. I'm actually not, I'm not qualified to talk from the charity end and the needs of people, as some people in this forum are. But it is that acknowledgement and planning for it now, knowing that there is going to be more of a need than there's ever, thinking that there's going to be more of a need than there's ever been. I mean, I really do believe that the economic fallout by the time we get to Christmas will be bigger than we've ever seen it in the UK. I really do. So it's about making that plan now with your business, with your brands, and looking at, okay, what can we do? What can we get out to customers? Who can we work with to make sure that we give people the best chance of being able to have a Christmas day than they've ever had? And some of the businesses some of the large brands that we work with at In-Kind Direct, of course, are so crucial to this, because this isn't just about the daily needs, not just about hygiene. This is also about the acknowledgement that it's Christmas Day, which actually takes it to another step. So I think planning it now, the fact that we asked that question today, we should definitely expect the need to be higher than ever. And therefore putting it into the plan now, I think, is what's needed by the brands.
Thanks, Sarah. I think it's a real call to action there, and one that we know is not far off as we look for Christmas just around the corner. I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of our panel members that you've joined us today, and thanks so much for the great questions that have come through in the last few minutes. Hopefully I've been able to pick up on a few of those. As I've listened to the different perspectives that you've shared, Michael and Michelle and Sarah, what I've found so helpful is hearing from the brand perspective that working together is the way forward, and those partnerships. And that feels like, I'm hearing that both from Sarah, from your experience of working with local businesses, being able to reach out into the communities. And Michael, you have built new partnerships through this period of crisis, and we're delighted that one of those partnerships has been with In-Kind Direct. And those products you spoke about, Michael, having access to those branded items, whether it was some of those essentials, has really helped those incredible number of families that you've been working with to feel valued and supported during this period of crisis. I mean, I'm going to be going away and really reflecting on what the three of you have shared. For us at In-Kind Direct, we are here to do as much as we possibly can to bring together those incredible corporate partners like PZ Cussons, who want to make a difference through their amazing branded products like Carex, as well as reaching out to thousands of charities. We want to see more charities join us so that we can achieve more in the future. I think the three of you have reminded me that it's going to get more difficult and more challenging. So a huge thank you to the three of you, Michelle, Michael and Sarah, for your time. We look forward to picking up on some of the other questions and coming back through our blogs and social media. But we do have another date for our diary. We do have our third speaker series, which will be held on the 21st of October, Wednesday, the 21st of October at 11 AM. And we'd love you to join us. We'll be sending out more details soon, and I'm sure it will build off the back of this conversation as we continue to share examples of our incredible charity network, as well as the amazing corporates we work with, to give us all ideas to enable us to feel confident to adapt and to build partnerships. Please do visit our website for further details on that webinar. And I just want to end by again thanking everyone, and thank you all of you for joining us, and look forward to you joining us at future events. Thanks everyone. Bye bye.